Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most widely read, heavily debated, and honestly historically influential collections of literature in all of human history, the Gospel accounts of Jesus of Nazareth. Specifically, we're going to focus on the sheer volume of textual data surrounding his miracles. And regardless of your personal background, analyzing these ancient texts as a literary and historical framework is absolutely fascinating. You see, the texts don't just present a random assortment of magic tricks. They actually build a highly organized, escalating case for absolute authority. So let's talk about this massive number. Across the gospel narratives, there are exactly 37 distinct miraculous events recorded chronologically. When you sit down and read them back to back in the King James Version, the sheer density of these events is honestly overwhelming. To really grasp what the original writers were trying to convey, we can't just read it as an unstructured list. We need a structured way to understand the underlying architecture of the text.
Instead of a speed reading marathon, we're going to logically group these 37 events into 4 escalating domains of authority: healing the human body, command over the spiritual, power over nature, and finally, defeating death itself. Right, let's kick things off with level 1, healing the human body. This is by far the most frequent type of miracle recorded in the texts, dealing directly with human suffering and biology to establish a baseline of authority. And just look at the sheer variety of conditions here. The writers describe him curing everything from leprosy and paralysis, which they called palsy, to long-term chronic conditions like a 12-year issue of blood, and even structural anomalies like a withered hand. The narratives are quick to point out that these weren't just private, behind-closed-doors events. They were highly public, and man, did they spark intense conflict with the religious leaders, especially when he purposefully performed these healings on the Sabbath, directly challenging the establishment's rules.
Now, you might assume every healing in the text is instantaneous, but the methodology actually isn't always identical. Take this incredibly unique 2-step account at Bethsaida. He spits on the man's eyes, touches him, and initially the man says he sees men as trees walking. It literally requires a second touch before his vision is fully restored. The narrative isn't afraid to show a progression here, which adds this bizarre yet incredibly fascinating layer of realism to an ancient medical account. Even more striking is that physical touch wasn't always a requirement at all. The narratives often emphasize distance, illustrating a power that completely transcends physical proximity. A great example is the centurion, a Roman military leader. He basically applies his own understanding of chain of command to sickness itself, telling Jesus he doesn't even need to come to his house, just give the order. The account notes Jesus actually marveled at this, demonstrating an authority over disease that operates exactly like a military command. Okay, moving right along to level 2, command over the spiritual. So we go from visible, physical biology to the invisible realm, where the Gospels detail multiple, highly dramatic exorcisms, and the King James language here is just absolutely striking. When encountering these entities, there is no long, drawn-out ritual. According to the accounts, these unclean spirits instantly recognize him, often shouting out his identity as the Holy One of God. And his response? Incredibly brief, a single, authoritative command: hold thy peace and come out of him. The narrative presents an absolute subjugation of spiritual forces to his voice alone. The crucial point in stories like the Gadarene demoniacs is the visceral, destructive scale of these forces. The text describes 2 men who were exceeding fierce, living out in tombs. When the spirits are commanded out of them, they beg to be sent into a nearby herd of swine. The result? The entire herd violently runs down a steep cliff into the sea and perishes. The writers use this incredibly vivid imagery to showcase the intense reality and magnitude of the spiritual realm being commanded. Now, we must objectively note that this level of power did not exist in a vacuum. It caused massive polarization in the narrative. The religious elites of the time, the Pharisees, couldn't deny the exorcisms were actually happening, so they attacked the source. They accused him of casting out demons through Beelzebub, the prince of demons. This really highlights the intense socio-political friction these miracles generated. I mean, the claims were so disruptive that his opponents literally attributed his power to demonic origins.
Escalating even further, we hit level 3, power over nature.
At this point, we're no longer just dealing with individual bodies or localized spirits. The writers now claim an authority over the fundamental laws of nature and physical matter itself. And chronologically, this dominion over matter is where the entire narrative actually begins. The very first recorded miracle kicks off at a wedding in Cana, where water is turned into premium wine. The text notes that this specific act manifested forth his glory. It's a subtle but profound establishment of his authority over molecular elements right from the start of his public life.
And then the scale just explodes from there. When a massive, life-threatening storm begins to sink the disciples' ship, Jesus is asleep. They wake him up in a total panic, and he delivers these 4 iconic words: "Peace, be still." The result is instantaneous, a great calm. The narrative specifically notes that the disciples weren't just relieved, they were terrified, asking each other what kind of man even the wind and the sea obey.
Next, we look at the manipulation of physical matter to create provision. The visual imbalance presented in these accounts is just staggering. You have a massive crowd out in a desert place, 5,000 men, and that's not even counting women and children. The starting materials, just 5 loaves and 2 small fishes. Yet after blessing it, the authors claim not only was everyone entirely filled, but the leftovers filled 12 baskets. That is a profound claim of creating matter from virtually nothing.
Of course, this explainer wouldn't be complete without looking at how the texts bookend the disciples' journeys. We see 2 miraculous catches of fish. Early in the narrative, the catch is so massive, the net breaks, and the ships literally begin to sink, driving Peter to his knees in fear. Then, in the second catch, at the very end of the Gospel accounts, exactly 153 great fishes are caught, yet the net holds perfectly, and it ends with a peaceful breakfast. It beautifully illustrates a complete, almost casual command over the natural environment to provide for his followers.
And the writers just continue to stack these claims, walking on a boisterous sea in the middle of the night, instructing Peter to cast a hook to find exact tax tribute money sitting right in the mouth of the first fish he catches, or cursing a barren fig tree that immediately withers away. The writers leave absolutely no room for ambiguity here. The claim is total, absolute mastery over the physical world.
Which brings us to the ultimate escalation, level 4, defeating death itself. Healing the sick and commanding storms is one thing, but this level presents the systematic reversal of the final human frontier. The narrative details 3 highly specific, distinct resurrections. He interrupts a funeral procession to bring back a widow's only son at Nain. He takes a synagogue ruler's deceased daughter by the hand, casually claiming she was merely sleeping while the mourners literally laughed at him. And lastly, he brings back his beloved friend Lazarus. Now, what's truly fascinating about the Lazarus timeline is the deliberate, almost agonizing delay recorded in the text. When he hears his friend is sick, he doesn't rush to heal him. He waits. He abides 2 whole days in the exact same place. By the time he finally arrives in Bethany, the record explicitly notes Lazarus has been in the grave for 4 days already. The narrative ensures the viewer knows this was a medically and completely hopeless situation before he even acted. Standing in front of a cave sealed with a stone, with people actively warning him about the smell of decay, he simply cries with a loud voice. He calls a man bound head to toe in grave clothes back to life. This narrative absolutely cements the highest domain of authority claimed by the writers: total dominion over human mortality. So, what brings all of this together? Let's look at the underlying mechanism: faith. To really understand these 37 events, we have to look at the one crucial requirement tying almost all of them together. The narratives heavily emphasize that faith was the active catalyst required for this power to be dispensed. But importantly, the writers don't describe faith as a passive, quiet belief. It's portrayed as an active, relentless, and often desperate pursuit. We see it in the extreme measures people took, like friends tearing apart a roof to lower a paralyzed man down to him, or a woman risking absolutely everything just to touch the border of his garment in a dense crowd. Over and over again, he credits the individual's faith as the actual mechanism of their own healing. Whether it's 2 blind men crying out on the road, or a marginalized Samaritan leper who was the only one of 10 to return and give thanks, the accounts make it abundantly clear that active faith unlocks this absolute authority. It wonderfully puts the agency deeply back into the hands of the individuals who are suffering. So the crucial point we're left with is this: the writers of the Gospels did not compile these 37 spectacular claims by accident. They meticulously structured a narrative of escalating authority over illness, the spiritual realm, physical nature, and death itself. Based on this highly organized presentation, what ultimate conclusion did the Gospel writers intend for you to make about exactly who this figure was? It is a profoundly fascinating literary and historical question, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring the primary sources